Vachai Jai Tulsi Maharani. We offer our most respectful obeisances to all who just like desire trees, who could fulfill the desires of everyone. Jaya Radha Madhova Kunya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhova Kunya Bihari Gopi Janabalabha Yidivadu Dhagute Gopi Janabalabha Yidivadu Dhagute Yasodananda Vraja Janarandana Yasodananda Vraja Janarandana Jamuna Tera Banachare Yamuna Tera Banachare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janabalabha Yidivadu Dhagute Gopi Janabalabha Yidivadu Dhagute
Yasoda Nandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yasoda Nandana Vrajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Banachare Yamuna Tira Banachare Jayarana Madhuba Kunda Bihakti Jayarana Madhuba Kunda Bihakti Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravidakacharya, also Teta Satashi Shimad, His Divine Grace Abhaya Chadananda Bhaktivedanta Goswami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, ISKCON Founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda Shidwaita Gadadha, Shivasati Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radhakrishna Gopi Gopinath Sayam Kund Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavanam Ki Jai, Maturadam Ki Jai, Jagannath Swami Ki Jai, Yamuna Mai Ki Jai, Shrimati Lasi Devi Ki Jai, Samveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glories the assembled devotees, all glories the assembled devotees, all glories the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Samaniti Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravati Pacharni Nivashesha Shanyavati Paschatya Deja Tarni. So today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 52nd chapter, text 34. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Kachet Vak Kushalam Brahman Rajato Yasya Hi Praja Sukham Vasanti Vishaye Palyamana Sa Me Priya Kachitva Kushalam Brahman Rajato Yasya Hi Praja Sukham Vasanti Vishaye Palyamana Same Priya Kachedva Kushalam Brahma Rajato Yasya Hi Praja Sukham Vasanti Vishaye Palyamana Same Priya Kachit Jitva kushalam brahman rajato yasya ki praja sukham vasanti vishaye palyamana same priya. Not yeah. Anyone else? No. Kachit, weather. Va, your. Kushalam, well-being. Brahman, O Brahmana. Rajata, from the king. Yasha, whose. He, indeed. Praja, subjects. Sukham, happily. Vasanti, reside. Vishaye, in the state. Palyamana, being protected. Sa, he. May, to me. Priya, dear. Translation, O Brahmana, is your king attending to your welfare? Indeed, that king in whose country the citizens are happy and protected is very dear to me. So you can repeat. O Brahmana, is your king attending to your welfare? Indeed, that king in whose country the citizens are happy and protected is very dear to me. Okay. So there's no purport by the followers of His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada, but there's little commentaries by the Acharyas, so we'll read those. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, that king is dear to me in whose country the people live happily. Jiva Goswami says, though considering that the Brahmana was fixed in Dharma by being satisfied in spite of undergoing difficulties, he asks about the mercy of the king as a cause of his coming. Since the Brahmana had nothing to desire for himself, the king should assist so there's no calamity for the Brahmana. And finally, Sanatana Goswami. The king who protects the citizens is dear to me, or Dharma is accomplished by Brahmanas who are protected by the kings. Is there assistance from the king so there's no danger for you and your relatives, O Brahmana, by your welfare? The Vedas are safe since you aren't directly the Vedas. He means only or certainly. So, actually, let me read the verses again. Kachitva kashlam brahman rajato yasya hi praja Sukham vasanti vishaye. Halyamana same priyaha. So Om Gana Timirandasha. Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshur. Unmilitam Yena Tasmai. Shigurve Namaha. So in this particular verse, contrasting with the last time I gave class, we're talking about a Kshatriya Dharma. And just to reiterate, to repeat the verse that we quoted before about where Dharma comes from. Actually, just to repeat some things. The Dharma actually comes to the word dri, which means to maintain. So, remember? And then Dharma is given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the rules of engagement and how to assign people to a particular social order are defined by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Dharmam tu sakshat, bhagavat pranitam. We often talk to people, not specifically about Dharma, but about religion in general. How do you know what you know? In other words, epistemology. Why do you believe in what you believe in? Why do you think this is religious? Why do you think this is not religious? And usually people have no concrete explanation for why they have certain set of beliefs. And so we simply answer that our beliefs are coming from God, not coming from some theologian or mental speculator. So they directly, Dharma, so religious principles can only be given by God and repeated by those who are his servants. So now we're going to talk about Kshatriyas. Kshatriyas are quite interesting because we generally have a very stereotyped understanding of what Kshatriyas are. We definitely think about them fighting, although they do fight. And we don't think of them in terms of other activities. But first, let's talk about their qualities. And there's 3 verses I'm going to read from different scriptures, 2 from the Bhagavatam and 1 from the Bhagavad Gita, that talk about Kshatriya's qualities. Of course, the Bhagavad Gita one I'm sure that everyone's familiar with. But in the 7th canto, 11th chapter, text 22, there's a little bit different list. It mentions, first of all, to be influential in battle. What that means is that the Kshatriya is at the forefront of the battle. Not like the modern leaders of society who are not Kshatriyas, who sit in their underground bunkers and they feel very much protected. They're sitting behind a whole group of screens and ordering people to do this and that. And they are not Kshatriyas. A Kshatriya would actually either die in the battlefield or he would win over his enemy. And of course, there's that typical story that I usually tell, that Prabhupada told, about this one Kshatriya who went out to fight his enemy, and he didn't conquer the enemy. He just ran away from the battlefield. So he came back, and his wife said, "This is not my husband." She wouldn't let down the drawbridge or whatever gate they had in the castle or whatever in the house. She said, "My husband would never come back unless he was at least severely injured, dead, or have won the battle. So that's the influential in battle. And second one is similar, is unconquerable. Now, does that mean a Kshatriya never loses a battle? He never gives up. He's not conquered like that. He never surrenders like that. So even though he may lose a battle. And another one is he's patient. And actually we see this quality in Lord Ramchandra when Sita Devi was kidnapped and Lord Ramchandra had to take the help of the monkeys, and he got their help, they agreed to help. But then it came time for the rainy season, the 4 months of the rainy season, Chaturmas or whatever it rains in that part of India. And he had to wait in a cave for 4 months to actually, and normally most of us, I'd be going crazy in the cave, beating my head against the cave wall. But so being patient, that means when the Kshatriya is doing what he's doing, he's very strategic. And the battlefield, he's very strategic. He's has some influence by the mode of passion, because Kshatriya is in the mode of passion, but he's not controlled by the mode of passion. There's a difference. He's not controlled by the mode of passion. His service is in the mode of passion, but if he's controlled by the mode and he's acting passionately, then he's going to create havoc. So he has to think very strategically when he's doing something, planning things out, not just rushing into the battlefield or rushing into some decision. So the next one is challenging and charitable. He challenges his opponents, and if a Kshatriya is challenged, he has to respond to the challenge, and a Kshatriya is always giving charity. To control the bodily necessities, sounds like a Brahmin almost, isn't it? It's not that he just gets out of control. To be forgiving, wow. Generally, you think of a Kshatriya being vengeful, don't you? So this gives a broader picture of what a Kshatriya is. To be attached to the Brahminical nature. So not only to be serving the Brahmins, but to be attached to Brahminical activities. In fact, a Kshatriya can maintain himself. Normally he maintains himself with taxation, and then, of course, when he fights, there's the spoils of war. But a Kshatriya can maintain himself by doing sacrifice. It's actually, I was reading this yesterday, that just like we talk about the Brahmin, yajan, patan, dana pratigraha, a Brahmin does sacrifice, teaches sacrifice, he teaches worship, he learns worship, he gives charity, accepts charity. But the one thing the Kshatriya can't do is accepting charity. But normally, yes, he is maintaining himself by taxation. But a Kshatriya, according to Prabhupada, I was actually surprised to read this, Kshatriya can do some of the Brahminical activities except accepting charity. Except accepting charity. So, and then to be always jolly. Jolly means extremely happy and truthful. These are the symptoms of Kshatriya. That's 7-11-22. So, this is how we can ascertain if someone is an actual Kshatriya. These are external symptoms, of course. Then in the 11th canto, we find another list, 11, 17, 17, and similar list, but some of them are a little different. Dynamic power. And here's another one that we didn't hear before. Bodily strength. So a Kshatriya engages in physical activities to build up his strength. Determination. Heroism. We talked about that before. Tolerance. Generosity. We talked about that. Great endeavor. Steadiness. And again, devotion to the Brahmanas and leadership, the natural qualities of the Kshatriya. And finally, 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, text 43. You have the list that most of you are familiar with, so we'll go over this quickly. Heroism, power, determination, resourcefulness, courage in battle, generosity, and leadership are the natural qualities of work for the Kshatriyas. And of course, chivalry is a main one too. And actually, Prabhupada comments that when you have Kshatriya marriages, that many times people die during the marriage ceremonies or the Swayambara Swayambara ceremonies. Just like when Krishna was kidnapping Rukmini, I mean, he was firing arrows at the opposing soldiers. And so, of course, the word Kshatriya is composed of two different words, Shat and Triya. Shat means harm or pain, and Triya, or Triyate, sorry. Triyate means to free one or protect one from pain. Okay. So Kshatriya is also twice born. Oh, another point, that I forgot to mention is Krishna. Krishna generally appears as a Kshatriya. Now, there's exceptions to that, when Krishna may appear as a Brahmin, like Lord Kapiladev, but generally he appears as a Kshatriya, and Prabhupada comments the two dynasties that Krishna appears in are the Surya Vamsa and the Somavamsa. Surya is the sun dynasty, Somavamsa is the moon dynasty. So, of course, Krishna, he appeared in the moon dynasty, and Lord Ramchandra appeared in the sun dynasty. Kshatriya is also twice born, and he also has to perform the Garbhadan Sanskaras. Actually, Prabhupada said one who doesn't perform Garbhadan Sanskaras is outside of the three Varnas. And Kshatriya is trained in the Gurukula of his spiritual master, and he follows the directions of the Brahmanas. And if a Kshatriya doesn't follow directions of the Brahmanas, he can be killed or deposed by the Brahmanas, just like the story of Maharaj Vena. Maharaj Vena, he was the son of Maharaj Anga, and Vena had a lot of bad qualities, like when he would go to play with his friends, he would kill his friends. So his mother would ask him, "Where are your friends?" when he came back from the childhood pastimes or childhood activities. And Vena would say, "I killed them." And Vena's father, he took Vena's bad activities as a benediction to give him an excuse to take sannyas, so he left the kingdom. He said, "This is a bad son, but he's also a good son, because he gives me an opportunity to renounce." So anyway, so Vena was made the king, and he was pretty good at keeping down the criminals. Very, very good at keeping down the criminals. And then what happened, but he's also very good at keeping down the Brahmins. He declared himself at one point to be the supreme personality of Godhead, or the person to be worshipped in the kingdom. And so the Brahmanas performed a sacrifice, and they killed Vena. So the Brahmanas acted as a check and balance to the Kshatriyas. And Vena, of course, had his body churned, and out of that body came Ritu and Archie, incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the Goddess of Fortune. So one interesting word that's mentioned here in this particular verse is the word praja. Praja means those who are born. And Prabhupada comments elsewhere in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the story of Parikshit Maharaj, who is protecting the bull and the cow from the personality of Kali. He says, the Praja means everyone who is born in the kingdom. That means all animals, all living entities, the king has his responsibility to protect. And so, not only protect in terms of, fighting and keeping them from harm, but he has to see to all the physical needs. This is quite an interesting concept of a Kshatriya. His physical needs, psychological needs, and the spiritual needs of the citizens. That's interesting, isn't it? One would think, the Kshatriya doesn't see to the spiritual needs, but he needs to see the spiritual needs. And so let's talk about fighting first. Protection, which is the main thing we think about Kshatriyas. So the Kshatriya has to practice hunting in order to do that. And the Kshatriya, there's a verse in the about a Kshatriya's consciousness in the 6th canto, 10th chapter, text 33. So there's a Kshatriya's consciousness in protecting the citizens in terms of fighting. There are two ways to meet a glorious death, and both are very rare. One is to die after performing mystic yoga, especially bhakti yoga, by which one can control the mind and living force and die absorbed in thought of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The second is to die in the battlefield, leading the army and never showing one's back. These two kinds of death are recommended in the Shastra as glorious. So this Kshatriya consciousness is glorious to die in the battlefield. And here it's given an equivalency to dying practicing Bhakti Yoga. Why is that? Because when the Kshatriya is engaged in his dharmic activities, protecting the citizens, that is Bhakti Yoga. Yukta Vairagya. Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir Brahmangno Brahmano Hutam Brahmatena Gantavya Brahma Karma Samadhanam. When one works for Krishna, doing his prescribed duties according to the Varna, and the result is to please Krishna, the goal is to please Krishna, that activity is spiritual. So, just like an example of this, where a Kshatriya was willing to basically die rather than not fulfill his duty, was Arjuna's vowing to protect the Brahmana's sons. Arjuna was visiting Krishna in Dwarka. And when he was visiting Krishna in Dwarka, there was one Brahmana who was having some trouble because his sons kept dying right after they were born, or they kept disappearing, one of the two. And so he went naturally to the king, because the king is responsible. The Kshatriya king was responsible not only for protecting from, some other soldiers who were coming or people, criminals and stuff like that, but he was responsible for making sure that no one died untimely. That was his duty. And that the weather was good. Right now we're experiencing challenging weather here in North Carolina. It's kind of hot. And in one sense, realistically, that bad weather is due to the sinful activities of the citizens. So the Kshatriya has to make sure that there's no sin going on in the kingdom. I'll tell another story about that in a second, but let's finish the Arjuna story. So Arjuna, the Brahman, he went to Krishna in Dwarka, and he said, what is the good? So your duty is to protect. And Arjuna said, I will take care of the protection. I am the great Arjuna. And if this Brahmana's sons are not protected from here on in, then I will kill myself. I mean, that's the determination. That's the dedication to Dharma. He said, I'll kill myself. So anyway, as you know, the Brahmana's sons or one son, disappeared. And Arjuna got ready to immolate himself. And Krishna said that's not a good idea. And of course, then they went to see the Mahavishnu who had stolen the son, because the Mahavishnu wanted to see Krishna and Arjuna. But the whole point is Arjuna's determination and being responsible for all sorts of welfare in society. Another instance of that, of course this wasn't so dramatic, was that in Ram Raj, there were so many inauspicious things going on. Lord Ram noticed it. He said, there must be some body who's doing something irreligious in society. So he went on his chariot and went around the kingdom. And finally, he found this lower class man who was acting as a Brahmin and doing sacrifice. And what did he do? He immediately cut off the guy's head. Immediately cut off the guy's head. So that the responsibility of the Kshatriya is like that. And also administration. Actually, I'll tell some stories about how the Kshatriya is responsible for rain. This is interesting. First of all, you have Lord Rishabhadev. When he appeared as the son of Nabi, there was no adequate rainfall in the kingdom. So what did he do? He used his own mystic power, because he's the supreme personality of Godhead, to bring the rain. He was responsible for that. And, of course, then it rained. Another story about that is the famous story of the king in the Ramayana, Romapad Maharaj. And Romapad Maharaj also had a drought in his kingdom. And it was because there was some offense that had been made previously. And so it was said that the only way that you could bring rainfall to the kingdom was to bring this Brahmin Rishi Shringa to the kingdom. And then he had to employ this whole trick, calling for some beautiful young girls to attract Rishi Shringa, because Rishi Shringa had never grown up seeing women before in his life, so he had to be tricked to follow this one beautiful girl on this floating island and going back to Romapad's kingdom. And of course, Rishi Shringa was the one who ultimately performed the Putra Kameshti ceremony for Dasarath. Another story is actually even Janaka. Janaka had a drought in his kingdom, in Mithila. And in order to solve his drought, he, as a king, got out a plow and a bull, and he personally was plowing the land with the golden tip of the plow. And as he was plowing the land, guess what happened? No one knows. He hit a little box, and the plow didn't move. And inside was Sita Devi. So you see how much responsibility the kings had. There's an interesting quote, too, how the king had to make sure that everyone is jolly. Now, of course, this is in relationship to a temple president, because the temple president is, in one sense, fulfilling a Kshatriya mode, isn't it? So this is a letter from Prabhupada. You know, the combined Kshatriya. Yeah, I know. This was a letter to Hridayananda Maharaj when I was a member of the temple. What? Yeah. So it says, as president, so that, you know, but we could take these instructions as indications how Kshatriyas should act too. So as president now, you will be forced to advance in Krishna consciousness, because you must always set the highest example yourself, and I think this is Krishna's special favor in you. Try to always see the highest purity is maintained in all respects. You know, that's also administration there. And example. Become yourself very convinced of this Krishna. Be always preaching and trying to understand some basic points from different angles of vision. Keep the devotees in your temple always satisfied and jolly. And that will be your success. And then finally, the final point is how the king is responsible for the spiritual. Whoops, that was a bell. The king is actually responsible for the spiritual welfare of the king, of the citizens. And I am going to read some verses that indicate Lord Rishabhadev's preaching. Of course, this is from the 5th canto, 1st chapter. Fifth canto, 5th chapter, beginning with text 1, which we use very often for preaching Krishna consciousness. And of course, the first one is a very famous verse. And these are instructions given to his sons. And he had sons, some sons were Brahmins, and of course then you also had the Navayogendras, and some sons were Kshatriyas, and one son was King Bharat, the next king after Lord Rishabhadev. So, Nayam Deho Deha Bhajam Niloke Kashtam Kamam Arhite Vidbhujam Ye Tapo Divyam Putraka Sadwal Shudyad Yasmad Brahma Shoka Twanantam. And this is a verse we often use for preaching, at least we used to use for preaching for the Sunday feast. And the translation of this verse, reading, Lord Rishabhadev told his sons, my dear boys, of all the living entities, so this is the king preaching, who have accepted material bodies in this world, one who has been awarded this human form should not work hard day and night simply for sense gratification, which is available even for the dogs and hogs that eat stool. Very strong preaching. One should engage in penance and austerity to attain the divine position of devotional service. By such activity, one's heart is purified, and one attains this position. He attains eternal blissful life, which is transcendental to material happiness and which continues forever. Brahmashoka Twanantam. So here is the king preaching, something, and an angle we don't hear much about. And of course, the second verse, just very quickly, which is, one can attain the path of liberation from material bondage only by rendering service to highly advanced spiritual personalities. And then, I'm not going to read the whole verse. Verse 3 is, those who are interested in reviving Krishna consciousness, increasing their love of God, do not like to do anything that is not related to Krishna. And then he gives the example of mingling with people who are busy maintaining their bodies, eating, sleeping, mating, defending. And then finally, the fourth verse, it's actually, that's nunam pramata kurute vikarma yadindriya priti apranoti. When a person considers sense gratification the aim of life, he certainly becomes mad after materialistic living and engages in all kinds of sinful activity. So, these are the teachings of a Kshatriya, and Lord Rishabhadev is the ideal Kshatriya. And finally, Prabhupada said, when we preach Krishna consciousness, it's sort of in a Kshatriya mood, because we're protecting people. But, like Prabhupada said, a lion on the chase, a lamb at home. So we have to learn how to shift between these two modes. When we're out there, it's just like we're on the battlefield. Like Prabhupada said, in the final days, devotees, he didn't want him to travel and preach. And Prabhupada said, let me die fighting for Krishna. So there's this Kshatriya mood. And we certainly find this in Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who was known as Nishringa Guru. I mean, he would go up to impersonalists and sort of grab them, around the collar and say, what are you preaching this nonsense? If you think everything is one, why don't you just wear a piece of cotton rather than this shirt? Like that. So, there's this Kshatriya mood. So those who are members of the Krishna consciousness movement, as far as possible to spread Krishna consciousness, following in Srila Prabhupada's footsteps, we should try to imbibe somewhat of the Kshatriya mood and also maintain our Brahminical status. So, any questions or comments? Yes.
My question is that, thank you, Maharaj. My question is that you said that Kshatriyas are patient, forgiving, and tolerant, but they also have to fight to protect. So, how do they?
How do they forgive?
Yeah, how do they do all of that?
If the person surrenders, like Lord Ram, I mean, for example, let's say after Indrajit was killed, the monkeys, they wanted to tear apart Indrajit's body. And Lord Ram said, our enmity is ended with his dying like this. And if someone surrendered, or there's also the story of Vibhishan, who, when Vibhishan was trying to join Lord Ram and the army, the monkeys no one trusted him. But Lord Ram said, even if Ravana himself came and surrendered, I would accept him. So the Kshatriya would accept surrender.
But our role for forgiveness as devotees is not, it's more unconditional forgiveness in terms of devotees and Vaishnavas, right? Like
Yeah.
we as Vaishnavas practice unconditional.
Yeah, we have to cultivate unconditional forgiveness. And not vengeance. Like you see in Ram, especially my favorite is Lord Ram's pastimes. He wasn't vengeful at all. He actually one day he defeated Ravan early in the battle. He defeated Ravan and he said, "Look, tired, go home. You have a chance to apologize." And of course that made Ravan even angrier. And then you had Indrajit do his thing after that. Anyway.
Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kandar Ako Vikamaniya Vishesha Shobha Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasa Sakalen Kriya Priti Manti Vasyan Vipan Vikayanti Jiram Naganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadhu Jala Vigrahasya Govindam
Namo Vishnu Vajaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Sammaniti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Vajayane Nivesesha Shunyavati Matsya Chanti Satarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Shiva Sati Gaura Bhaktivinoda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Ram, 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, 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 Hare Hare. Looking on Rate. You're looking on the day. No, Rate. Rade, Rade, Rade. Naya Rade, 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 Jaya Rade. Rade, Jaya.
Chaitodarpanam Arjanam Pavamahadam Shreya Kairavya Chandrika Vitaranam Vijavadu Jivanam Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam Pradipanam Pranamrita Swaranam Sarvatma Snapanam Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Namakari Bahuda Nija Sarva Shaktis. That really like the outfit. Bhagavan Mamapi Durdaiva Midrishami Hajjani Nanuraga Nadapi Sunichena Tororapi Sahishuna Amani Namana Dana Kirtaniya Sadahari